Hey, good morning, everyone. Just getting ready for live performance tonight, and it's a little bit of a different one than my usual techno. This is a sound art piece called "Can You Hear the Earth Breathing," which has a pretty cool background. Some of you may know I'm also a sustainability researcher, really interested in how sustainability and electronic music fit together, and worked with a colleague, Lisa Knoll. Let's Learn Machines is her Instagram, and basically downloaded CO2 concentration data over the last 800,000 years. And then Lisa used her data coding skills to turn that into MIDI files that then get played back through this system to make sound. And then also layering in different field recordings of plants, oceans, traffic, industry, things that make CO2. So really trying to have a climate change themed piece. So, and I'll put a link to that down below so you can see a recording of the performance. But I thought I'd go through the setup, which is, as I mentioned, similar but different than the techno setup. So the first thing you'll notice, there's no drum machine, no kicks. This is very much a sound art, experimental style piece. So what we've got here is the Octatrack, Modular, the Analog Heat, Cosmos Looper, just off screen here, the Soma Lyra and the Vermona RetroVerb. And I'll just walk through how those are put together and why and sort of what I'm doing with that. So the Octatrack itself is playing back long samples. So as part of the production process, I loaded all those different MIDI files into Ableton because there's different time scales. Last week, last month, last 60 years, last 10,000 years, last 800,000 years, and played those back at different time scales through with the MIDI coming out of Ableton into the modular and then recording back into Ableton, and then put some effects and stack those together. So there's different tracks that have the 4 different tracks playing back the modular. And then we also have 3 different tracks that are playing back the field recordings, whether it's the sound of my breath, walking in the woods, the sound of the ocean, wind in the trees, standing in the street in Berlin, hearing the traffic, construction noise, all those kind of things. So that's playing back from the Octatrack and also sending clock via MIDI into the modular system here. And then we've also got the Lyra, and this is used in a couple different ways. So when I start, the Disting Mark III here, that's the, it's like a Swiss Army knife in modular. It has like, I don't know, 50, 60 different functions. And I'm using 2 of those for this performance. The first one is just a simple frequency reference. So you can actually set the frequency and in hertz, and we'll send out either a sine, actually both, a sine wave and a square wave. So at the start, on the day of the performance, I look to see what was the CO2 concentration level, which usually is around between 417, 418, 419 parts per million in the atmosphere. And that's actually coming live from a research center in Hawaii in the US. So I set the frequency to that, send the sine wave pure into the Lyra, and use that to start. So the Lyra has an external in, so that sound, that pure sine wave, gets processed through the distortion, through the LFOs, through the delay and feedback from the Lyra. I also take advantage of the fact that not only can you send external sounds in there, but you can send CV to modulate the voices and also the delay, and you can also send gate to trigger the different sounds. And those are coming from different parts of the modular, which we'll get into in a second. And then the Lyra runs through the Vermona RetroVerb, which is a really nice spring reverb. There's actually a spring built in here. And this has a really nice sound, but it also has external inputs. So it's got a CV input. So I can also send CV from the modular here, which, depending on how I choose, can either affect the filter or the VCA, in addition to the LFO that's built in there. So that gives some nice way to connect the modular with the external pieces. For the modular itself, This is an interesting combination. It's almost exactly the same setup that I use for my techno setup, which is pretty cool, I think. But it has a couple of interesting things. So one, this Instru Scion, this actually detects changes in voltage either from the skin as I'm pressing on it right here, or there's a little plug right here where I can connect pads onto a plant and it will change. It's got two pads and it basically measures the electrical resistance between those two pads. And since living things are always changing based on temperature, water content, all those kind of things, it measures the changes in those differences in that electrical conductance, sends it in here and sends out 4 different CV and 4 different gate outputs. So I use those to modulate different things and will actually send from the CV here into the Lyra or send a gate into the RetroVerb or modulate parameters of some of the different effects. So that's a really nice way to bring in some living randomness to things. In terms of the voices, I've got the Noise Engineering LIP, which is quite a harsh digital voice, going into the Dope for Wasp filter. Then I've got the Mutable Instruments plates, or it's actually a clone of that, which is nice because it has a whole range of different sounds, from sounds that kind of emulate the rings module to percussive sounds, a whole bunch of different things. And that's running into the Mosaic 1 HP filter here. And then for effects, we've got the Monsoon, which is a clone of or an open source version of Mutable Instruments Clouds. And then the Make Noise Mimeophone, which is a really interesting and quite strange delay. And then a few other different modulation sources, a clock divider. And then this whole mess of cables here is really nice. There's a couple of different manufacturers that do this, IntelliGel, Dope for a few other ones. But all of these inputs here go through this network cable, RJ45 cable, into, and then runs into here, and then output, and then run in different places. So I'm using this case as all of the modulation sources, the sound sources, the voices, sorry, I forgot one other critical piece. The other way I'm using the disting here is one of the functions is that it can play back MIDI files. So on an SD card there, I've got 10 different MIDI files, the ones that Lisa created, and that will send out pitch and gate in sync with everything else. So I can route those around to different places. So I can choose to play the last month, last year, last 10,000 years, and send those out to the different modular systems and either use the pitch as pitch or use pitch as a modulation source. As we've talked about before, one of the nice things about modular is that anything can modulate anything. So that gives a really nice flexibility and variation in the sounds. This one here, I'm really using as a mixer for a couple of different reasons. So first of all, I love the Befaco Hexmix. Usually it's kind of designed that there's 6 channels here, like a regular channel strip on a mixer with volume, EQ, and pans. And then this one here is the extender, which is kind of designed to sit on top. So you have like a full channel strip. And this has got 3 aux sends, individual outs, and also a pre-fader level so you can cue the different sounds. Based on this, I've got them side by side so I can have that kind of control. So what happens here is aux 1 is going into the mimeophone, aux 2 into Monsoon Clouds, and then aux 3 is going into the Cosmos looper pedal, which is a really interesting pedal. You can either sort of have it as kind of like a regular looper, which is clocked, but I'm not doing that. So this is sort of free floating. I can send things in, record it, reverse it. It's got 2 different, a 2-line delay, a 4-line delay, a reverb, and a granular delay. So I can send stuff in there, have that kind of looping and morphing, blurring and changing in the background. And one of the nice things about this particular mixer with the, which is kind of unique and modular, it's got a low and high for the aux sends. So it's specifically designed that I can use the high level modular effects, but also this one is returning back at line level, which is much less volume than the modular systems. And that can be a problem if you're trying to match those levels, but here you can just set it to low, which means it's expecting line level, and then it has an internal preamp that'll boost that. It's also got a headphone output here, and what I can do is any of these, if I flip that, I'm hearing those cued in the headphones. So I can, just like a DJ, you can have a cue in one ear and the mix in the other ear, so I can sort of look at the, preview those sounds before I bring them in, which is especially good for this particular setup, because I really do patch on the fly, and sort of, you can see there's actually not that much patched in here. I sort of build that up as I go through the whole set. And then the outputs here, actually another nice thing about this mixer, it's got modular level outputs and also line level outputs. So I can send those to the analog heat. And in this particular set, that's not really doing a lot. There's a filter there, a little bit of tape saturation, or tape style saturation rather, to sort of glue and hold things together, and providing the master volume, so I've got a good level going into the club system. So that's the setup. Yeah, I'll be playing that tonight. I'll let you know how it goes, and yeah, now I got to get ready to pack it all up and head to the club. See you soon.